Hello, warships have been on my mind lately, and this really because of the news. Because a few weeks ago, the United States Navy announced that it was canceling the Constellation frigate program. And then today came this bombshell announcement that Trump made that he was going to build battleships, which of course he was going to call the Trump class battleship. What the hell is going on? Let's talk about it. My name is Michael Shirkin, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Pax Americana, a conversation about world affairs, global conflict, military strategy, and anything else that happens to be on my mind. As usual, if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. Feel free to send some money my way using the thanks button, or you could buy me a coffee using the link in the description below, or you could become a member, which would make you one of the coolest people on the planet. Now, let's start by talking about the Constellation, and then we're going to move on to the Trump-class battleships, which I struggle to talk about with a straight face. The bottom line is that the United States Navy is in really bad trouble. It's in deep trouble. And along with the Pax Americana, I mean, we already knew the Pax Americana was in trouble, but Trump seems intent on crashing it with style. So here's the deal with the Constellation. Once upon a time, the United States Navy used to have a lot of frigates. What's a frigate? A frigate is like, think about it as like it's like a Ford F-150 pickup truck of a warship. It's large enough and powerful enough to be really useful for all sorts of purposes, but it's a workhorse, but it's also it's smaller and cheaper than a lot of higher end warships. But frigates often are just much more useful, and because all of these things are becoming so insanely expensive, the value proposition represented by the frigate is increasingly attractive. Anyways, the United States Navy used to have a lot of these. It used to have 51 Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates. It retired the last one, however, in 2015. Now, these days, everybody agrees that the United States Navy needs more ships, and especially more frigates. And this is especially true given the failure of the Littoral Combat Ship Program, and then the Zumwalt Destroyer Program, and now the Constellation Program. Now, before the Constellation Program, what happened is, the way the Constellation Program came about is that the United States Navy reckoned that the most expeditious and affordable way to go about creating quickly a frigate fleet was by taking a proven off-the-shelf design and only making a few modifications of it to meet specific U.S. requirements. So the Navy settled on the Franco-Italian frigate known as the European Multi-Mission Frigate, or FREMM, F-R-E-M-M. It's a great ship, makes perfect sense. The Navy planned to build 6 of them, and of course the Navy screwed it up. The Navy couldn't help itself. Even after they started building these things, it kept changing its mind about how to modify it, the original FREMM design, what capabilities to put in it, to add to it. It kept tweaking it. It kept adding things, and every time they would change something, then this would create problems with the other things that they already changed, etc., etc. The net result was that the costs soared, the ship became much longer and heavier, and the whole thing became significantly behind schedule. That's why the Secretary of the Navy canceled the whole thing. As a stopgap, the Navy has since announced that it would build a fleet of frigates based on the latest Coast Guard cutter. If you figure, again, that's just the most expeditious thing to do. All of this is really bad news. I mean, the Navy needs frigates. And particularly since the other kinds of warships are kind of falling out of vogue just because they're so expensive. I mean, these days in the modern Navy, what one might find would be corvettes, which are small ships, frigates, which are medium-sized, destroyers, which are large warships, and then cruisers, which are very large ships. Now, to put numbers behind these descriptions, modern frigates have a displacement of about 4,000 to 7,000 tons. And what I mean by that is that when you put a ship in the water, like when you get into your bathtub, the water level rises, right? Because you're displacing water. You put the ship in the water, it will displace a certain amount of water, and that water has a weight to it. So, and if I say that a frigate has a displacement of 7,000 tons, that means that the weight of the water that it displaces is 7,000 tons. Above 7,000 tons, you get into destroyer territory. And then at about 10,000 tons, you start getting into cruiser territory. And of course, these words, the definitions are extremely elastic. The Germans, for instance, are now building a destroyer or a cruiser, whatever you want to call it, that they insist on calling a frigate. Once upon a time, these terms, frigate, destroyer, cruiser, meant something because it referred to a specific purpose for which a ship was intended. These days, it's really just less relevant. And plus, also, I think that nowadays, because of the cost of these things, people are much more interested in the value proposition represented by frigates, or they want to evoke the value proposition. Maybe that's why the Germans are calling their cruisers or destroyers a frigate, because it sounds more economical, even if it isn't actually economical at all. The other way of measuring these things, and the other thing that's important, besides the name, so the classification is not important. What is important is the size. The size of the ship correlates with capabilities, firepower, and what they call magazine depth, which refers to the number of missiles that you can fire before you run out of missiles. Modern ships tend to be optimized for a specific thing. Usually they come in one of three flavors. There's air defense optimization, so they're optimized for air defense to protect other ships, or anti-submarine warfare, also to protect other ships, or they're intended to be true general purpose, do everything ships. And of course, all these ships usually have some anti-ship capability and some ability to strike targets that are on land. But these ships are specialized, are optimized, which determines what kind of radar they use and what kind of missiles they have. Along with the size, they also have more of what's called vertical launch systems, or VLS, or VLS cells. These are like, think about them as like a shipping container that's on its end. It contains a missile, and it's inside the ship, and it's internal. So basically, only like a hatch opens up, and the thing gets fired out of the hatch. It offers several advantages. For one thing, it means that you can fire a whole bunch of these at once, or in quick succession, because they all go up and then they veer in different directions, whereas launchers, more traditional launchers, have to be pointed in a certain direction to hit a target, which makes it hard to fire at different directions at once. Also, the fact that they're inside the hull, it protects them from the elements, and it makes the ship stealthier with respect to radar reflection. So all these modern warships that you see that have these clean lines and these clean decks, that's because of the VLS cells, because the missiles are inside the ship and they're kind of hidden from view. The other advantage also is that the VLS allows you to fire a whole bunch of rockets. They're all ready. You can fire a whole bunch of them in a rapid volley. That's important because the naval theorists believe that it's those initial volleys that are really decisive. So the more you can get off in a few seconds, the better. Anyways, VLS cells is often used as a crude proxy to talk about the firepower of a ship. It's crude because, for one thing, not all weapon systems actually use VLS, so it doesn't reflect the true firepower of a ship, and also because VLS can be loaded with different kinds of missiles. So some ships have VLS that are mostly loaded with anti-air missiles. Some ships might have VLS that are mostly loaded with anti-ship missiles. So you can't compare these two ships, even though they're the same kind of ship, because they have different weapons. So just to say that one has more VLS than the other, that doesn't tell you anything. At any rate, just to give you some examples of the way these things are equipped, the FREM frigate, the Franco-Italian thing, has 32 VLS cells. The new French FDI frigate has 16 or 32, depending on the variant. The Arleigh Burke class destroyer has 90 to 96 VLS. The American Ticonderoga class cruiser has 122, and the new German monster frigate, the Type 127, F-127, will have 96 VLS. The recently announced Coast Guard cutter-based frigate that the Navy is going to buy will have precisely 0 VLS. This matters. I mean, it really matters. I mean, the Navy needs more ships and also needs more capable ships. Yes, it already has a large fleet. It's got about 300 ships. But remember, the U.S. Navy has global responsibilities, and it must maintain a global presence while also having enough ships around that you can concentrate force and create massed fleets in order to deal with other fleets, like maybe the Chinese fleet. The Chinese, by the way, in the last 10 years have surpassed the U.S. Navy and are now the largest. They now have the largest fleet in the world, the largest navy in the world, with about 360 ships. The Chinese have also a very important advantage, which is that because they don't have the same kind of global ambitions and global presence that we do, their larger fleet is in fact closer to hand. They're not dispersed all over the globe the way ours is. So that's already really important. That means it's already difficult for us to amass naval power large enough to deal with the Chinese fleet. It would be great if we had more ships. Also, something to remember when you're dealing with the numbers of ships in a fleet, At any given time, roughly a third of the U.S. Navy is out of commission because it's in ports being serviced and repaired. This is perfectly normal. It's perfectly fine. I believe other navies, the French, the British, etc., are operating at more or less the same kind of ratio. So what you see is the point is that when I say 300, that sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's not that much. Plus, remember, at any given time, we have 3 or 4 carriers at sea, and each of those carriers has to have several ships that are dedicated simply to protecting it, which is an additional burden on the larger overall pool of ships that are available rather than in port. Given the staggering cost of warships, the obvious answer, if you want more warships, is to go for frigates, because frigates, as I mentioned before, represent sort of like a value proposition in terms of bang for the buck. They are cheaper. How much do they cost? Usually these days, about $1 billion plus or minus $100 or $200 million. It's a lot of money. The new Coast Guard cutter-based frigates the Navy says it's going to build will answer with respect to having more hulls. There's a value in that. But given their relatively light armament, they have no VLS cells, one wonders if they're fit for purpose. I mean, remember, frigates are never intended to dominate or overmatch the adversary. For that, you need a bigger ship. But they are intended to be adequate or good enough to be useful. Will these new frigates be adequate for anything? Also, how much are they really going to cost? The Navy seems to believe, or wants to believe, that simply taking a cutter ship and frigatizing it, whatever that's going to involve, is going to be quick and easy and cheap. But remember, these are the people who took a perfectly good frigate, the Frem, and turned it into a dumpster fire. So can we trust them? Do they know what they're doing? How much is this thing really going to cost? And is the expense going to be worth it, given the limited capabilities that these ships are going to have? I think it's a really good question. Meanwhile, the Europeans are building these wonderful new frigates. Even the Greeks just took delivery of their first of their 4 spiffy new French FDI frigates, which means that they've got better ships of this class than we do. Doesn't make sense. The obvious answer, if you want to get new modern frigates in number quickly and relatively economically, is by buying foreign and off the shelf, like buying actual FREMs or buying an FDI or any of a number of options currently being made by the British, the Germans, the Spanish, the Italians, the Japanese, or the Koreans. Of course, we're not going to do that. We should be the world leaders at this kind of stuff, given the fact that our Navy is so big. We have this incredibly large domestic market, which means that we should just have more money, more resources, more innovation, everything. We should be the best. Everybody should be envying our designs instead of the opposite. It's almost like the U.S. car industry. The U.S. car industry should be the best, given the fact that the U.S. is the largest domestic market. And yet the U.S. car industry sucks and has sucked for decades. Now, why any of this is the case, I'm going to leave that for a separate video. Now, for today's bombshell announcement that Trump wants to build battleships, called, of course, the Trump class. He said he'd build 2 to start and then get 10, and then perhaps as many as 20 to 25, with the construction slated to begin in 2030. Now, the source of most of my information here is from a news report that came out really just a few hours ago, which caused me to not only rewrite the script, but actually to retape the script by the United States Naval Institute, the USNI. And it seems to be quoting the U.S. Navy and particularly the NAVSEA command, right? Anyways, before I get into the specs, as per the USNI article, Trump apparently said that he was going to be involved in the design of these ships because he says he's a very aesthetic person. And the Secretary of the Navy added to this that not only would the ship be the biggest, baddest, most lethal warship afloat, but it would also be the best looking. No, this is not the Onion. So what do we talk about? The USNI, U.S. Naval Institute news article said that the plan was for a ship with a 30-ton displacement and perhaps even as much as 35 tons. That's twice the displacement of the USS Zumwalt, which is currently the largest surface combatant in the U.S. fleet, and 3 times the size of Ticonderoga-class cruisers. It's a really big ship. Trump, in the announcement, bragged that these ships would be bigger even than the largest U.S. battleships of World War II, which, by the way, were the Iowa-class battleships. But not really. The Iowa class weighed in at 58,000 tons fully loaded, and according to the specs, it looks like the Iowa class is maybe like 7 feet longer than this new Trump class thing is supposed to be. I'm sure maybe they're going to like put a ram on it just to make it longer, right? Just to be able to get bragging rights. It'll be like an inch longer, and then say, look, it's the longest ship ever made. Still, okay, maybe it's smaller than the Iowa, but it's still going to be absolutely humongous. Trump also said that it would have the biggest gun ever carried by a U.S. warship, which of course made me think, oh, so then it's going to be larger than the 16-inch guns that are on the Iowa class. The specs that the Navy published don't mention anything about such a gun, so I'm just going to assume that this is BS. But the specs also said that this thing could handle V-22 Ospreys, it would carry hypersonic missiles, it would have 128 VLS cells, and perhaps an electromagnetic railgun. Pretty cool, huh? It's impressive. Surely this will be a really, 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 really impressive ship. Fine. But it's also impressively expensive. How much is this going to cost? According to the article, $10 to $15 billion for each boat. It makes sense. The Constellation class that just got canceled was priced at $1.2 billion each. The new German F-127 frigate at 10,000 tons displacement costs about 3 to 4 billion euros. So that's like what, $5 billion? The new Ford class carriers cost 13 to 15 billion dollars. So could this thing cost as much as a Ford class carrier, which is a much, much, much bigger ship? Possibly. I think depending on how much the Navy will fuss around with things like the electromagnetic railgun and some of the other tech that they want to put into this thing, it's a lot of money. I mean, we're talking, so it's at least $10 billion and could definitely be between $10 and $15 billion, which is roughly the price of like a dozen Constellation class frigates, or 10 to 15 FREM frigates, or maybe 18 FDI, or 4 to 5 Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines, which, by the way, cost about $3 billion each. It's putting a lot of resources into what amounts to a vanity project. And also keep in mind that whenever you have a capital ship of this sort, which is like the premier ship in a fleet, one tends to allocate other ships for the purpose of protecting it, which will place a larger burden on the rest of the fleet, though there's frigates that we don't really have. I can't think of a reason why. Like, why? Why are we doing this? What's the point? From a naval doctrine point of view, like naval strategy, can I imagine like a real requirement for this kind of thing? I can't think of a reason to do this. I think that to put it in the formal technical language of modern social science, this is all about big dick energy. It's about building a gigantic thing, slapping Trump's name on it, and then swinging that thing around, and then being able to brag about it, or to be able to say that you're going to do it. And of course, I don't think this thing is ever going to be built. I just don't think so. I mean, we can't even build frigates. How are we going to build this thing? And Trump also said that he was asked about it. Are there going to be enough workers to build these things in all these different shipyards? And he said, oh no, we're going to use robots. All right, so that means that there won't be that many jobs. But like, okay, so that means this thing is premised on the idea of of technologies that don't exist. We've done this before. This is how the Future Combat System fell apart. This is part of what happened with the Zumwalt class destroyer. Like this idea of building things with tech that doesn't really exist anymore. It doesn't really exist yet, or isn't really mature. It creates all sorts of problems. Okay, deep breath. Skepticism aside, I try to put my skepticism aside. I try to be objective here. I try to be balanced. I try to make arguments like for or against, or on the one hand, on the other hand. Can one make a serious argument in favor of this strategy, if I dare call it that? I mean, once upon a time, the United States was drunk on Alfred Thayer, man, and it built a big white fleet. Thank God Hegseth didn't call it this new fleet. This is the Golden Fleet. Thank God he didn't go with Great White Fleet, Big White Fleet, the way, I don't know. Anyways, we built this Great White Fleet and we sent it around the world to signal that America has arrived as a world power. And it made sense, right? And it made sense. It did things for prestige, for their profile. It showed off for industrial might. Plus, at the time, also Teddy Roosevelt was talking about walking softly and carrying a big stick. Well, I mean, we're not really walking softly here, but this is one big stick. Could this be a good idea? Could this serve the Pax Americana? I'm going to say no. I think it's a ridiculous idea. I think it's an impractical idea. And I think it makes us look ridiculous. I think it certainly makes Trump look ridiculous. I mean, just the very fact that he's putting his name on this thing. And it sounds like this is his latest casino project. It's going to be the best ever. It's going to be huge. It's just ridiculous. And as I said, I don't think we're ever going to build the thing anyway. So the whole thing is really just a show. It's just a spectacle. It's a whole bunch of fuss. It makes for good television, and people are going to be satisfied with that, and they're never going to be bothered by the fact that the thing never materializes or any of the benefits ever materialize. I think if you're serious about the walk soft and carry a big stick approach, if you're serious about having the hard power, about the Alfred Thayer Mann approach of having a big navy to get respect and to be able to intimidate people, all of that makes perfect sense. All of that is sort of borne out through history. But you do it by having a strong, large, capable navy that makes sense, that's coherent, that's cutting edge, that doesn't. It's coherent. I want that word coherent, and not sort of crazy or vanity project. And I feel like the best way to do that is like if you took the money that he's talking about on these ships. I mean, is this new spending, or is this going to be money taken away from other programs? And what other programs are those going to be? And, God knows we have enough problems with the deficit and the national debt and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is insane. But imagine if you spent the money on frigates, and not these Coast Guard cutter things, but real frigates like the Frem or the FDI or the British Type 26 or those big German things or these Japanese frigates that are supposed to be really, really great. So for the cost of one, you could have 12 frigates, right? And also keep in mind that at every given time, like I said, a third of the fleet is going to be out of commission. If you buy 12 frigates, 4 of them will be out of service at any particular time, but that leaves 8 that will be available. That's pretty cool. If you have 1 or 2 Trump battleships, how available are they going to be? And then there's this whole debate about the aircraft carriers that we've seen, and it's now erupting in France now because the French government just announced that they were going to build a new aircraft carrier. People say oh my God, you can spend all these billions of dollars on a new aircraft carrier. It's just a sitting target. It's super vulnerable to submarines and now drones and ballistic missiles. And then American carriers are going to be vulnerable to these Chinese long-range anti-ship ballistic missiles. Oh my God, we're putting all these golden eggs into one basket. We're going to lose them all. It's crazy. We should build more smaller ships. Disperse our resources. You can take out a few of our frigates, but there'll still be some surviving. There are two sides to this argument, but it does make you wonder. I think with a carrier, it's easy to argue that it's worth the risk because these carriers are so bloody useful for projecting power. Because, you've got these awesome aircraft on the carriers, and the aircraft can do all sorts of things, and they can fly really, really far, and they're great. With this frigate, with this battleship, everything the battleship can do, this big battleship can do, could also be done by a whole bunch of smaller ships. It just makes more sense to me, just because of the survivability and the attrition and availability. I'd really rather have 12 Frem than one of these battleships. It just makes more sense to me. Ideally you have both, but that would be insane. And what if we built 20 of these things? 20 times, let's say, $13 billion. That's $260 billion. What are we playing at here? Thank you very much. I hope you liked this video. Please stay tuned for more. There's plenty in the pipeline. If you look in the description, you're going to see links to my social media. I spend far too much time on Twitter. There's also Blue Sky, LinkedIn. I have my Substack called Pax Americana as well. There's some overlap with this channel, but it's not 100%. Just only some overlap. And then, of course, is my own website, michaelshirkin.com. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye.